Monday, January 17th, for those of you across the pond and beyond. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to you, and welcome to We Are Paradox Media, the Late Night in Rockies. I hope you guys have had an awesome week so far. You've been taking it easy. Man, we got a full 3-day weekend. My kids are lucky enough to get a 5-day weekend this week. I didn't realize Martin Luther King's birthday was on Monday, so their 4-day weekend turned into a 5-day, so man, they're really enjoying that. I'm kind of pulling my hair out. If you're listening live right now, you're listening to us on Spreaker.com. You can also find us live on KPNL Radio, which you can find at kpnl-ev.com. If you want to listen to us on your free time when you're working out or working it, make sure you tune in to Spreaker, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Castbox, Tumblr, SoundCloud, TuneIn Radio, User, Podcast Addict, and Podcasters. We also have a good time over on our Facebook and our Twitter pages if you'd like to go over there and check that out. We have a thought of the day on there, basically, from the universe. And we also have some funny stuff that we like to post because we like to include humor in our broadcast as well as our pages. Make sure you check out our YouTube page. We are Paradox Media. Give us a like, follow us, subscribe, and make sure you give that bell a little tinkle. That way next time we have a show come out, you guys will be aware of the new show that has come out. I'm sorry Miss Mia Savage was here singing a song. Delightful to the ears, but I'm sure it was kind of hard to hear me. So tonight we have a special guest, one of my favorites, Mr. Stephen B Ubaney, and he's the holder of 4 collegiate degrees and has been inducted into multiple national and international honor societies. He is a Who Murdered Elvis book convalescent graduate of the University of Buffalo with a BA in Communications and Media Theory. Writing as a novice, Mr. Ubaney published numerous op-eds in multiple newspapers. He also authored articles that were published in magazines and trade publications. In 2013, he emerged his love of history with his quest for the truth, and he became the architect of the Who Murdered book series. So since the inception of the series, numerous volumes have been published as he works toward the completion of a 6-volume set. And I believe that's going to be taken down to a 5-volume set, which is scheduled for completion this year. So his research on numerous subjects has made him a frequent guest on television, radio, and podcast programs worldwide, and his knowledge into his subject matter is quite in-depth. Since the publication of the first volume in the series Who Murdered Elvis, his work has generated a cult following, and it is not uncommon for physical copies of his books to sell for hundreds of dollars on the open market. Mr. Ubaney's family history is a fascinating one. The unsubstantiated work of one ancestral researcher claims that his family can be traced back to the cousin of the Virgin Mother and 2 members of the Knights Templar. That is very intriguing. The work is in progress to validate that claim. What has been substantiated is that he is a direct descendant of Charlemagne, and his 10th grandfather, William Chase, came to America on the Winthrop fleet in 1630. William Chase's son Benjamin married Philippa Sherman, daughter of the Honorable Philip Sherman, who was the first Secretary of Rhode Island. Mr. Ubaney is the 10th great-grandchild of Philip Sherman. Welcome, Stephen, and thanks for coming to hang out with us tonight.
Hey, I heard you missed me, so I'm back.
I did. I was like, man, it's been a week. Where the heck is that guy?
I did the hat trick. This is the 3rd time, I think, right, on your show?
Yes.
So today we're going to learn a little bit about FDR.
Yes, we are. And actually, it's kind of funny how FDR and Elvis kind of collude there, because I believe when Elvis was a boy, FDR was president, and I don't know, he wasn't too good at, I don't know, money. He was pretty good at politics, but not really the money aspect of it.
He was an interesting figure, and he kind of gets paid. That was a while ago. I mean, we're going back 80 years. So there's a lot covered in dust about FDR. So That's why some people, it's a while ago, so some people are like, "What are you writing about FDR for? It was so long ago." I just thought it was a fascinating subject, and I don't think there's any greater evidence that anyone was murdered than FDR, especially when you look back after decades and decades. So, yeah, he was a great president, a great war president. I think he cared about people. Of course, with all the good that's said about any human being, you can say a few things that are not so great. He, FDR he liked the communist ideology. And when I say that, I have to put an asterisk next to that because we didn't know communism. They didn't know communism as we know it today. It was pushed as this cradle to grave society where everyone was cared for, and it had nothing to do with evil empires and nothing like that. So back then, to them, communism was this new great thing that you could escape the rise and fall of capitalism and the capitalist markets, because you have to remember the Roaring '20s crashed, and they blame capitalism for the crash. So now here comes FDR in the next few years, and he's embracing communism. So communism won't crash. So
yeah, and it was kind of funny, like when he was introduced to it, didn't they like have this whole setup to just make everything look beautiful and lovely and everything's perfect, and then behind the scenes it was actually quite ugly.
yeah, the Soviet Union was they were very sharp. They're smart people. They extended invitations to people in academia, people in the news media, people in Hollywood, and other dignitaries and people of influence to come to the Soviet Union and take a look around at this new marvel that is sweeping the world called communism. And what they showed them was a quote unquote Potemkin village, which basically means a cardboard village that doesn't function. It's basically Main Street USA in Disney World.
Right?
It's painted up. It looks great. Everybody looks happy, but it was just it was imitation. It was world. So these people got sent back to the United States with packets from the Soviet Union as to how they could transform their capitalist society into this utopian society of communism. So the CPUSA, Communist Party of the United States of America, who was already formed in this country, and it's still around, believe it or not. If you go to cpusa.org or .com, I can't remember which one it was. They're still around. They're in New York City. That's where they're headquartered. And then visit the webpage. You'll be surprised what political platform they're supporting. It's amazing. So communism in America had a foothold back when Woodrow Wilson started. Of course, Woodrow Wilson and FDR had they chewed the same dirt. We're dealing with old money here. Woodrow Wilson came out of academia, and he made FDR Assistant Secretary of the Navy. So FDR got his start under Woodrow Wilson, who Woodrow Wilson did not like the Constitution as it was written. He did not like the three branches of government. He liked the, oh boy, I'm trying to think. Come on, Steve, think about it. Well, I'm trying to think of what form of government that he liked, where the judicial and the legislative branches were combined. The parliamentary system. There we
go. Yes.
So he was not a real fan of the Constitution, and I think some of that, he felt that it could have been improved, and I think it's some of that bled over into FDR, which idealized this new fascinating ideology called communism. And it doesn't mean he was a bad guy. I just think that, it was a new thing and nobody really knew what it was.
But yeah, I think a lot of people, even like not even in politics, but in Hollywood, were a bit misdirected. I just read, I believe it was last weekend after the show that I did with you, I did Storytime with Me, and I believe Lucille Ball and her old man came up on the radar there as far as having communist meetings or whatnot in her home. Supposedly she was not there for it, but it is on record, and they have so many records of so many different people that have been a part of it. It's kind of insane.
Yeah, they definitely had a foothold in this country, and it's really incredible when you think about, the CPUSA has been around since 1919, and they had operatives who felt that they were doing the right thing for America. So one of them was, pardon me, was Colonel Edwin Mandel House, who was the close ally to Woodrow Wilson. So Woodrow Wilson is being buddied up with this person who later on they determined was writing communist literature and putting it in newspapers. So they were pretty influential, more so than we knew at the time. Of course, decades later, you go back and say, oh, wow, look at that. But, we didn't know that at that time. So there's a lot of people here very influential in and around FDR who are communists. And communist wasn't the big hot button term back then as it was today. They didn't know about evil empires or anything like that. It was, so you have to, like I said, when you say FDR was a communist, you have to kind of put a little asterisk next to that, because of the time period in history, a lot of people were communists who had no idea what it really was going to blossom into.
Yeah.
So, also who was very active in the CPUSA was a fellow who was in FDR's cabinet, who became very, very close to his wife there, Eleanor, was Harry Hopkins. Harry Hopkins was connected with Eleanor Roosevelt through the CPUSA, and he was very fundamental in FDR's inner circle. If you call it cabinet or not, I don't know, but he was the one who did the Lend-Lease program. He did the New Deal for FDR. He was instrumental in bringing forth a lot of things that were coming out of the CPUSA at that time. So there were so many communists in and around FDR, and I mean, it was amazing. I mean, everyone from Harry Dexter White to Alger Hiss, they were communists, and they were exposed by Whittaker Chambers and Elizabeth Bentley, who had huge spy rings in the U.S. government, communist spy rings. So you got to understand, back then, they thought they were doing the right thing. So you can't really fault these people. You have to kind of put that little asterisk next to their names,
Yeah,
So
and it's like, they're totally misdirected and they don't really know what it's all about. They think they do because of, like you said, Main Street USA, or this beautiful little thing that they put up to show like how well this works, when in reality it's bad for the community. They're thinking of doing the best for us, and they're thinking this is a good thing by what they've been shown. Like, how are they supposed to know any better until, you really get your feet wet in there?
it was a fascinating period in time, very pivotal period in time for America, and Americans don't know much about it anymore. It's a generation past now, and it's important that we learn these lessons. I think that we move on. So I'm a history guy first. I
Yeah.
don't go around looking for conspiracy. I don't know if the earth is flat or round. All I care is that I'm on it. All right. I
Right?
don't I don't I don't run around, trying to find these conspiracies. I dig into history, and I do find conspiracies, and I know them when I find them. But that's not where I hang my hat. I like this stuff, the boring stuff, the history stuff. That's what I do, I just wanted to run down a short list of the places in government where communists, we were later told or revealed that they were in power. The Public Welfare Committee, the U.S. Treasury Department. We had communists in the U.S. Treasury Department. Think about that. The Price Administration, the War Production Board, the Labor Advisory Board, the National Labor Relations Board, the State Department. We had communists in the State Department, the Attorney General's office, and lastly, the Agricultural Adjustment Administration. All of these things were either changed by FDR or put into place by FDR. And of course, when Whittaker Chambers and Elizabeth Bentley were caught, they decided to sing a little song, and they blew everybody in. So we were very well surrounded, or infiltrated, or influenced by the communist element in our government during that time. So kind of interesting period in time. Of course, what we're told about in history right now is FDR was, and he was a savior of this, and everybody loved him, and this and that and the other thing. And he helped a lot of people. A lot of people were starving, and he helped them through a bad time in America. He did a lot of good for a lot of people. You can't say he didn't. But it's how he went about some things that infuriated people.
Yeah. He did produce a lot of jobs and everything as far as like rebuilding roads, so on and so forth, but yeah, he wasn't too good at that part of it. He was good at war games and stuff like that, but otherwise everybody's just throwing up their hands like, what's happening?
I think that FDR was the greatest president we ever had in war, because he got a chance to use that cunning side of him. The guy was just so smart. I mean, he was so far ahead of everybody militarily, thinking in advancement and strategy. He just it was really pretty fantastic. You think about how smart he was, but a lot of people in America hated him. And when I mentioned this in this book, Who Murdered FDR, a lot of people didn't like it, especially people who were not necessarily on the conservative side of life. There were some people who were Democrats and liberals who took exception to it, and I had to explain to them, look, this is a book about who murdered FDR. I have to talk about his enemies. And I had to tell them, look, I don't care how you vote. I don't care if you vote. I'm writing the story about this. I'm revealing information. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Don't take it personally, So some of the people, here's a short list of people who really hated FDR. They were big money people. And FDR was taxing industry to the point where he didn't know this, I'm sure, but he was prolonging the Great Depression because they were so heavily taxed they couldn't create jobs. So DuPont Chemicals, George Eastman Kodak, Henry Firestone, Samuel Colgate, Henry Ford, the Frick family with Carnegie Steel, the Heinz family, the Hiltons, the Mellon family, Robert Woodruff, who was chairman of the board of Coca-Cola. And these are some of the people in America who were the wealthy of the wealthy, who really couldn't stand this guy because he wouldn't let them make any money. The markets were just all tied up. He was really giving them fits of rage. And of course, we don't hear about that in history. We just hear about the other side of how wonderful he was. And he did some great things, but not everything he did was great.
Yeah, you can't make everybody happy, and like you're saying, the rich really get offended, even though they're the lower percentage of our population. They really have a strong pool. And when he was in power, they were really hating it. Like, they didn't like it whatsoever. I know Churchill tried to get in pretty close with him, but him and Churchill didn't really jive due to the whole communist thing. I mean, it's kind of intriguing just to look at the whole thing happen.
And it's really a fascinating time in history to look back. All of these people who I mentioned, from DuPont all the way to Robert Woodruff, and this is where the story gets interesting, they had all had their portraits painted by this Russian painter, Elizabeth Shumatov. Her and her husband, Leo, defected from, and she wrote a book, actually. Most of this is in her book. They defected from the USSR to come to America. And she was a fantastic portrait painter. And she was, as a matter of fact, FDR died right in front of her.
I know, that was kind of shady. It's like, what's happening here?
She had painted FDR's portrait earlier on in his presidency. And then she was kind of like in the garden club, she was painting all of these famous people's portraits, and you can look up her work. She's remarkably talented, I mean, really, really fantastic. So she's in the presence of all these people who hate FDR.
Well, did she
And
not like him too? Like, I kind of picked up like she didn't really care too much for him.
I don't really remember how it's put in her book. I don't think she thought much of him at first, but I think she grew to like him. So in her book, I mean, she's an Ivanov. I mean, she comes from some class over there. She was definitely not a commoner. She was a daughter of General Ivanov. So she comes over. Her family held high office in the government, and according to her book, she came to America with her husband Leo on a mission from the provincial governor. Well, I'm telling you, I just can't get this right. Can I? Let me try that again. Take two. Okay, let's try that again. She came to America with her husband Leo on a mission for the provincial government headed by Alexander Kerensky. And so here and Leo Shumatov, now you got to remember, these people barely speak English. They're in a foreign country. She manages to paint her way into the upper crust of our society, and he goes to work for the Sikorsky Aviation Company, and they're bouncing around New York State, and they're always finding other Russians. So you
I
have to
know
kind of
they
ask.
had different cliques and private lines and stuff like that. It was pretty intriguing. People that used to play with the ham radio and stuff used to pick up on certain privy discussions and such. It was pretty interesting.
They definitely had an underground that were helping them out. So because he was a business manager for the Sikorsky Aviation Corporation, and he knew nothing about aviation. So number one, how would you do that? Would you go to Russia and all of a sudden just start contacting other Americans in government, and then
I don't think so.
end up bouncing all around the USSR?
Right?
No, there was quite a network in place for these people. So uh,
Jay in the chat room was wondering, have you read FDR, My Exploited Father-in-Law by Curtis B. Dahl?
I have not read that one.
He says you really should.
Okay, let me write it down. I will. Okay, let me get a pencil and write it down. What was it? What was the title of it?
FDR, My Exploited Father-in-Law by Curtis B. Dahl. Dall.
I will read it. I had to read. I can't even begin to tell you how much research went into this. I had to read and read and read and read and read and read, and you can't get them all.
Right.
That's one that slipped between my fingers. You can't get them all, even with the greatest of intentions. A book or two slips by. That one I didn't read, but I will. I'll read it. So the plot is thickening here in America. FDR is surrounded by some people who are not fond of him. There were also people in the White House who were not fond of him. He was having FDR's wife, Eleanor Roosevelt. He was having a romantic liaison with her secretary,
Oh my
and
goodness.
he Missy LeHand was his personal secretary, and he was also having relations with her, and he was stepping on a lot of toes of
I
people
mean, they,
inside.
yeah, they say stuff like, if you can't keep it in your pants, keep it in the family. And yes, he married his cousin, so I can kind of relate to the guy. I don't know.
It's a lot of people married their cousins. Believe it or not, it was. I know this sounds crazy today, but I mean that was kind of commonplace. If you go back to Princess Diana and Prince Charles, they were cousins. If you remember Gone with the Wind, the Wilkses always marry their cousins. It's crazy, but I mean, there was a time in American history when that was, it was commonplace because they wanted to protect their bloodline. Sounds crazy today,
Yeah,
but
didn't Theodore like give him the elbow and a way to keep the bloodline pure there.
Yeah, that was a really that was a that was a bizarre um, situation. I mean, Eleanor was born a Roosevelt, married a Roosevelt, died a Roosevelt. The woman never had to change her monogram in her entire life. You know, it was uh, it was a very bizarre situation to say the least. Uh, but it happened. That's kind of the way it is. So all of this is surrounding FDR, and of course, there's a lot of other things going on. America is in the throes of war. Um,
And you had
and
just brought up, when I so rudely interrupted you, people in the White House that didn't care too much for him.
yeah, he was stepping on some toes, and it was really the plot is really thickening around this guy, and he strangely or conveniently or inconveniently dies in the presence of a Russian spy and her the person who helps her do her painting. There was she traveled with a photographer, and this is the man's name was his nationalization papers were Nicholas Kubakinski. Okay, and then it went from Nicholas Kubakinski to Nicholas Cobbins, and it went from Nicholas Cobbins to Nicholas Robbins. So here we have two people with FDR in the little White House in Warm Springs, Georgia, and there's Secret Service is just not anywhere to be found, and he's in there with with Elizabeth Shumatov, whose husband is on a quote unquote on a mission from the Russian government, and this other guy who is helping her going around the world or the country rather, in the presence of people who hate FDR, and he mysteriously dies in front of them. I mean, you can't make this up. How can again? Remember, this is the peak of the greatest war we've ever had. How is Secret Service letting these people through? I mean, it's impossible for them to check these people out when this guy's nationalization papers are Nicholas Kubakinski and he's going by an alias of Nicholas Robbins. There's no way they could have checked these people out. It's a very bizarre circumstance. Very bizarre indeed. So all of this is going on. We have all of these people in and around Roosevelt who are not necessarily fond of Roosevelt. And I would have to say that even Eleanor was a little miffed. I mean, here she is being the good wife, and she knows that he's having affairs, and it's a bad situation. There's a lot of bad blood in the White House. So, murdering FDR should not be a surprise to anyone because he just got into office, and there was an attempt on his life. And it's well documented. In 1933, a guy named Giuseppe Zangara tried to murder FDR when he was in Miami. He tried to shoot him, and he missed. And he ended up shooting the mayor of Chicago.
Oh no.
And I mean, the poor guy was, the poor guy was he must have been a hell of a bad shot. He was just standing next to FDR, and this poor guy gets shot. His name was Anton Cermak, and he was shot and killed. And this guy got the electric chair.
Oh
And
wow.
this is This is in the history books. Google it. Look it up. If you can trust Google to tell you the truth about anything anymore, but
Right.
look it up. It's out there. There were people who did not like this guy. So he gets elected. He makes some changes. He brings in the New Deal. And America's in trouble economically at the time. The New Deal is helping people, but it's not. I mean, it's helping people get through. It's helping people survive because there were no social programs like we have today. So it did a lot of good for a lot of people, but it wasn't the answer. They tried to push the second New Deal, and it didn't work. Nobody went for it. So that's when packing the court came about. He thought if he packed the court with his people, he'd be able to get the second New Deal in. So FDR knew he had to get us into war for a couple reasons. Everybody thinks that we talk about other people's spies, the Russian spies and the Nazi spies, and they're real. As a matter of fact, there were spy rings in America that were caught, and some of them were executed. Operation Pastorius was a Nazi spy ring, and 8 members they were all caught, and 8 members, and they were trying to attack civilian targets and heads of state, and they got the electric chair. The Duquesne spy ring, 33 members, another Nazi spy ring. They were all caught. I mean, this is real stuff. But America has spies too. When nobody talks about that. I mean, we're as good as they are, folks. And what was coming back was that the Nazis are pretty smart people, and they have V2 rockets, and they were getting close to finishing their heavy water experiments. And if they were going to develop the bomb with their V2 rockets to take that bomb to the 4 corners of the world, they'd conquer the world. And they were really, really close. I mean, I don't think that we know how close they were. FDR knew that he had to get this country into war, and he had to stop that. And he made some of the hardest decisions I think anybody has ever had to make, Pearl Harbor was the catalyst, of course, we know that. And
They totally messed that up, man. I was just like, holy crap. They knew it was coming.
The History Channel put out a document which has now disappeared, surprisingly.
Really?
2 documents about this have disappeared, and I wonder why, because I just looked them up. And it's odd that this has disappeared, and I'm actually going to inquire why. Because I want to know what history's being erased. Thanks, but the History Channel put out that we'd already broken the Japanese code, and we knew that they were going to attack. So the Japanese were in an interesting position. There's a big global chess match going on. Japan had just ended a war with China, and it was horrible. It was a horrible war. The last thing they wanted to do was go to war with the United States. They are an interesting country. They have few natural resources, and they're an oil debtor nation. They don't have enough oil to support anything, their industry, their military, anything. And FDR shut off their oil. And it put them in a situation where they had to go island hopping to get oil. So all of this is going on in the Pacific. Forget Hitler, forget the other side of the world. This is going on in the Pacific. And, it's not good. They had broken the Japanese code. They knew what was coming. I don't know if they necessarily knew where it was coming. I think they had an idea, because some of the most important ships were taken out of the harbor that night.
Well, and definitely taking over Hawaii. That'd be perfect for them.
Yeah, they were definitely. Japanese are pretty fantastic people. They're very disciplined. To their cause, and when they wage war, they don't play games. I mean, they're those are tough folks, man.
Well, they did a really good job of hitting the ships, but not hitting the compounds and different things like that they would need to use for their own military. They were right on with what they were doing. I hate it because it's our soldiers, but man, they did a pretty epic job with that.
Yeah, and this was in the History Channel, and it has gone away now, which is interesting, and I'm kind of curious. This was all put out in the History Channel on their website, and it guess what? It'd be gone. I was looking for it the other day, and I'm going to have to dig into exactly why they pulled that back, because FDR had to let that happen. He had to sell the American people on the war, because he knew what was coming with the V2 rockets. There's no way that he could let them get nuclear weaponry. We'd all be speaking German right now. So we had our own little spy network who was bleeding information back, saying, "Hey, look, we need to get into this. We get into this now." So he had a gut wrenching decision to make. He had to let the attack happen to get the American people involved and sell them on the idea of going to war. And it was a tough time. I mean, you think about the sleepless night that were the sleepless nights that would happen when you're waiting for someone to make that happen. But tell that to the 5 million mothers of the soldiers that would be killed if they actually got a nuclear weapon.
Right. And Jason in the chat room saying the warning on Pearl Harbor attack came to commercial Western Union wire that is in the book that he was telling us about earlier. And he also said earlier that you're really going to love that book when you read it. But he was saying that they knew about the attack about 15 hours ahead of time, and FDR let it happen. I don't know. I think there was some confusion there, like, no way is this happening, and whatever. Like, they were prepared, but at the same time, not really taking it seriously.
They needed to let something happen. They needed to get into the war big time.
Yeah, exactly.
So they needed to get into the Lend-Lease program, which they did, because we needed to get this country moving economically. And of course, a war will do that, and helping your allies will do that with military weaponry as well. So all of this is going on at the same time. We have these people who are around FDR who are not necessarily happy with FDR. It's a very interesting time in America. America is getting its mettle tested on the world stage, probably for the first time at this level. I mean, the Nazis were very, very interesting people. They had a jump on us militarily. Hitler was pretty shrewd. He, under the cover of other buildings like elementary schools and high schools and this and that, he was building factories and manufacturing airplanes and things like this, and no one knew what was going on. This was all a hidden military tiger that he was building, to the surprise of the entire world. And when he went to mobilize, people were shocked as to how he took this country from the grips of depression all the way to almost global domination. I mean, they were pretty advanced, and they had a lot of military might. So we had to really, what saved us was the mass production that America could do. The soldiers were off to war, and their wives are making planes. And the same thing was happening in England. There's an interview in the book with myself and my aunt, who was building Spitfires in Britain. And there's an interview with her and a story that she told about the strafing run that it wiped out the factory she was building Spitfires in, and almost killed all of them. I mean, they bombed Britain incredibly, night after night after night, trying to get these people to surrender, and Britain just was not having it. Pretty tough people. So all of this is going on at the exact same time. We're trying to go to war. The economy's a mess, and enemies are mounting around FDR. So there's a lot going on, a lot of moving parts to this book, and it was tough because I had to rely on some information that is uncomfortable. Sometimes I don't necessarily like some of the things that I run across, but it's part of factual history, so I have to put it in.
Right.
It can make you uncomfortable sometimes.
I know you actually got into a few libraries there, and were able to read a lot of stuff a lot of us aren't able to go and read ourselves. So I'm grateful that you were able to do that and to put this information into your book. I mean, I don't know. It's pretty mind-blowing.
I'm glad I did it. I wouldn't do it again. I had to go to, of course, I live in New York. I live in Western New York, around the Buffalo area, and I had to make the drive to Hyde Park. which is where, of course, FDR's mansion and now library is, the National Archives for his presidency. And I just basically lived there for a few days. And I went through some documents that were really, I found fascinating. I mean, I'm holding in my hand documents that are marked top secret about World War II that, 80 years prior or 75 years prior, would have been, the top of top secret. I mean, only generals and things are getting these memos and so forth. So it was very interesting. If you have a chance to go to Hyde Park, New York, I would highly suggest it. They went through the place. They just got a huge grant, 30-some million, to redo
Oh, wow.
everything. And you can go through this, it's period specific. So you can walk through the time periods of, you could go through, the museum. You're sitting at the kitchen table, and on the radio is one of his fireside chats. So it'll bring you back to that time period, and it'll walk you through the the authentic time period of what it would be like. So I found it was fascinating. But so FDR is starting to. He goes to the Tehran conference, of course, and he's they're trying to hash things out. They didn't trust him and Churchill. They were together in this thing, I think, very, very early on, if not from day one. And Churchill needed this is where the Lend-Lease came in. Churchill needed the resources that we had to, food, oil, and other materials that, that we had to make this work. We were doing the Lend-Lease program to China and the Soviet Union and other allied nations, and they were building planes and warships and all kinds of other weaponry. And without that, none of the allies could have withstood what Hitler was bringing to them. So all of this is going on, and they go to the Tehran conference from end of November to early December 1943, and here's where his health starts getting crazy. He had some great doctors. Of course, he was a Navy man, so Admiral Ross McIntyre was the head surgeon. He was the Vice Admiral Surgeon General of the Navy, and he was his doctor from 1932 all the way up until his death in 1945. And he ended up writing the book in 1946, The White House Physician. So he was the head doctor. He also had Lieutenant Commander of the Navy, Dr. Harold Bruin. And these guys were really in charge of the president, administering his medicines and taking care of him health-wise. But there's some interesting things going on that make no sense to these people. FDR's blood pressure is going out of control, usually after meal times. He would have, it would be a normal blood pressure, or what would be considered close to normal. And then it would go crazy, 310 over 190, and it would spiral out of control, and the guy would pass out. And, a time would pass. They'd administer drugs and this and that and the other thing, and nothing was working. And then after a time, it would come back to normal, 3-4 hours later or whatever it was. And they just couldn't figure out what was going on. They're like, why is this guy's body not responding to anything we're giving to it? It doesn't make any sense. And other authors have tried to solve this too. There's a couple doctors who wrote a book saying that FDR had cancer because they saw a spot over one of his eyebrows. A little mole that was changing and this and that, and they thought that he had cancer and it was going into his brain and it was affecting his body and this and that. And I really dug into this, and I asked a few other doctors, including a medical examiner, and we all kind of concluded the same thing, that people who have cancer don't really go in this bipolar health schism. They tend to just gradually get weaker and weaker, and it's a long, involved process, and they just kind of fade away and die. They don't have this
Yeah.
violent, back and forth from, death's door to regular health. And so we had to kind of dismiss that away when we were figuring this out. And we have to talk about, I have to put an asterisk here next to FDR's health. FDR his whole life was a pretty healthy physical specimen of a guy. And, he ended up with, I guess it would consider it infantile paralysis or polio. I'm trying to think of what they would call it today. And
when it comes to my mind, I think polio. Man, he worked so hard, and he did a really good job kind of covering that up.
He didn't have the use of his arms or his legs for a while. And I don't know how they didn't put this guy in an iron lung, because I don't know how he survived it any other way, but he did. So what they did is they put bars over his bed, and he would force his arms to work little by little by little, and he worked out with his arms, and he managed to get his arms back to normal, and his legs never came back to normal. So what he would do early on in his career, this was even before he was president. I know I just bounced backwards in the story. I'm sorry. But
oh no, I totally wanted to go over this stuff, because for me, like, that's what really inspired me about this president was the things that he overcame as far as his health, and how hard and determined he was to work through it, and the different things that he did do to make himself look strong and normal, when in reality he's got issues going on.
The guy was suffering something terrible. But he was in pretty good shape for the shape that he was in. He would go walking, quote unquote walking, trying to get his legs to work. And walking to him was putting his legs in 15-pound shackles and using his arms with crutches and basically dragging his legs behind him. And he did this every day in an attempt to try and get his legs to function again, that's a lot of raw courage. That's a courageous man there. And of course he did not fight the good fight, but he certainly fought the fight. So you have to admire the guy for that. So when we talk about all these health problems that he was having later on, after he got to the point where he accepted the fact that his legs were no longer going to work for him, he used some braces, and with the use of hanging on to somebody with one arm and using a crutch of the other arm, he could actually give the appearance of taking a couple steps. And of course the media was very, very fond of him, so they never showed anything unflattering of him, or anything that would put him into bad light, that he was crippled or anything like that. Because back then they thought that if you were physically impaired, you had to be mentally impaired too. And of course, today we know that's not true.
Yeah, it's pretty shallow.
It was just a different time. So
yeah,
he was in pretty good shape for the shape that he was in. He was very strong with his upper body. His legs were atrophied, and they wouldn't have held him up anyway. The muscles were shot. They were gone. And there's a couple of photos now have leaked out where he was at Warm Springs, Georgia, and you can see this guy's legs look like little kids' legs.
Oh,
it's really kind of sad. It really is. So, I mean, the use of his legs aside, when he became president, he enjoyed pretty decent health. They'd check his vitals and they'd make sure he was doing okay, and he was eating well, and he enjoyed fairly.
His food sucked.
Yeah.
Poor guy. I'm like, man, all I want is a good savory meal. That's how I felt through COVID. Like, I can't taste or smell anything. And I'm like, all I want is some good savory food. Nothing tastes good. Like, this poor guy didn't even have COVID, and he's got a shitty meal every meal of the day.
And I think he would have probably begged for COVID, because he would beg not to have tasted
right?
it.
Poor guy.
Yeah, the big joke that we're talking about is the Henrietta Nesbitt was a White House cook, and she was friends. She was friends of Eleanor's. As a matter of fact, they were neighbors, and he was one of FDR's. You know, she was one of FDR's wife's dearest friends, and she ended up being the White House cook, and she was certainly unqualified in which to do so. You know, I mean, there are numerous accounts where I think the most vivid was Ernest Hemingway came to visit the White House, and he said the soup was like rainwater.
Oh
You know,
no.
and it was just terrible. And there were multiple letters going back and forth that I saw in the archives where she was getting, you know, he was telling her, look, I don't want to eat this anymore. I mean, she was serving him things like 15 days in a row. And it was terrible to boot. So they had this little thing going on, and I laughed out loud. I'm in the archives, and I'm going through these letters, and I just had to laugh. You know, I mean, it was his writing in his stationery, and he's chewing out the White House cook. I thought, what a waste of it. What an ill use of the president's time. You know.
Your
So
food is very important for your health and mentally and physically. I don't know.
so um, fast forward back to the Tehran conference. Okay, up to this point, FDR's been pretty virile. Can't use his legs, but he's a pretty healthy specimen of a guy. Has some super strong arms because that's what he's using to pull himself around with. So his body starts doing things that no one can understand what's going on. And this is when his doctors start going, uh-oh, we might have a problem here. So they started to notice a couple things, that he started to be sick after mealtime, lunchtime, dinner time, snack time, whatever. His body was not responding to medicines anymore. And they started to realize, you know, there's something going on here that we don't really know about. So they put their heads together, and what they decided to do was get another opinion. So they took his health just became so terrible. If you look at the Tehran conference in 1943 and you look at what he looked like there, and the pictures are in my book, and you know what? I'll tell you how to get the book. Sorry, bad on me. It's this book is an ebook and audio book all the way around the world. It's Who Murdered FDR. You can pick it up there. If you want an autographed copy and you're in the U.S., you can go to my website, whomurderedbooks.com, and I'll send you an autographed copy. It's also in Kindle. I don't believe I have that one on Amazon. I don't believe that one is in print on Amazon, but it's on Amazon in every other way. So that's how you get the book. So they decide that they're going to, oh, wow, we've got to get somebody else involved here because this guy, we're kind of stumped. We don't know what's going on. So the big hotshot doctor of the day was Dr. Frank Leahy in Boston, who later he founded the Leahy Clinic, which is still in existence. And they released on the History Channel on April 12th, 2011, something else that the History Channel pulled off.
This is insane to me.
I don't know why. I looked for it the other day, and guess what? You know, it's just not there anymore.
And like you said, it's so far back in history. Why does it even matter anymore? Why are they pulling this stuff? It's like they're still trying to keep us blind.
I wish I knew, but I mean, the letter is in my book, and it's from his foundation. It was a secret letter outlining what he found. He examined the president, and he found, oh boy, you know, we've got a problem here. He's not suffering from the advance of polio. He's suffering from a poisoning.
Mm-hmm.
This guy is being poisoned. And it all started to come. I mean, they were baffled. They were sending him for x-rays. They were sending him for a barrage of tests, trying to scramble to find anything. And typically the advance of polio, again, as I lay out in the book, is you'll have muscle and joint weakness. You'll have muscle pain. You'll get exhausted. Fatigue. Yeah, I mean, you might have shallow breathing and sleep apnea. You might become cold, and your muscles will atrophy. That's just the byproduct of what this is. These were not what this guy was experiencing. He was having problems with his cardiovascular system. He was having mental problems, gastrointestinal problems, problems with his nervous system. He was having tremors. He had all kinds of issues, skeletal problems. He was having problems with his bone marrow. He was starting to look gray. I think they officially call that pallor, paleness, gray in complexion. And he was having renal problems. He was having problems with his kidneys. None of that is the advance of polio. This is an entirely different thing. And I'm glad I put that in my book, because that letter that he wrote as a summation of what he found is now gone. So I don't know why after all these years they would not leave that alone, but it's gone. I looked and looked and looked and looked, and I couldn't find it. And it was out on the History Channel's website in 2011, because I was using it, my book, and I was also using the information that I had gleaned from that for the book. So try and look for it. You might find it, but you know what? I don't think you're gonna. So
it's insane. Man, our government, they're like a bad set of parents. Well, on that note, we do have to go to our music break. So on this break, we have Miss Mia Savage from Antidote for Savages with Your Skeleton. We have Fireline Kiss. He's an on-the-road truck driver. He travels around with his 2 dogs and makes some epic music. He's going to be singing Your Eyes. And then we have Cockroach from the UK singing I See You. You guys don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after this musical break.
Take it, no matter how I
Welcome back, and thank you so much for joining us this evening on We Are Paradox Media's Late Night in the Rockies. Tonight we are joined by author, investigator, and time consumer in epic libraries, Mr. Stephen B Ubaney. Welcome back, Steve, and thanks so much for joining us tonight and educating us about FDR and what exactly was happening during those times. A lot of people are unaware of certain things that happened and certain things that were going on at that time, but it's pretty intriguing.
I think that almost everybody he had no clue as to what was going on. You had a media who was very cooperative to FDR, whereas that's different from today. They were also that way to JFK. They covered a lot of things up that JFK did that happened in and around his White House that were not necessarily savory to the public. Today, that's not the case. It doesn't matter who the president is. There's going to be some media outlet out to destroy you. Wasn't the case back then. So almost all of this wasn't known at the time. Everyone was cooperating. We were at war, so everyone was cooperating for the American cause. But now, as I said, decades and decades later, we have declassified documents and we have deathbed confessions, and it's fascinating to come back and revisit this. So when last we spoke, the Tehran conference is going on. FDR is starting to have some health problems. Dr. Leahy gets involved, and he gives a litany of information about what's really going on, the summation of him being the president's symptoms. And it was very interesting. Numerous times from 1943, from the Tehran conference to 1945, which was in the Yalta conference, FDR found himself in similar situations where he would be experiencing this after meal times. So, doing my research, I stumbled across something that I almost fell over backwards when I read this. I mean, every now and then you get lucky, and boy, I got lucky with this piece of research. I was reading one of FDR's favorite cousins' diary, published diary. She published it 50 years after his death, and her name was Daisy Suckley. And the diary is entitled Closest Companion. And on page 203, I'll paraphrase this. I won't bore you with this whole quote. It says that this is the president's fourth day in bed. He still feels somewhat miserable, although his fever is gone. Last Tuesday, without any warning, he fell ill at lunchtime, and he lay on his sofa, blah, 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 with a temperature of 102. I asked Dr. McIntyre what was wrong. Dr. McIntyre said it's a toxic poisoning, but we can't ascribe anything.
Okay, you just broke up. You just said, I can't ascribe anything, and then it went blank.
Oh, okay. Dr. McIntyre is responding in this article, and he said it's a toxic poisoning, but we can't ascribe anything to it. They know the president's being poisoned. It's right in this cousin's diary. So they're trying to administer sulfur drugs to combat whatever is going on. They know there's a poisoning coming from somewhere. So now they're piecing this together. Okay, he's sick after meal times. His body's not responding to the medicines we're giving. This guy's being poisoned. What's going on? So they're struggling to try and figure this out. And they're noticing every time he goes away from the White House to Georgia, Warm Springs, Georgia, which was one of his favorite places on earth, and he starts eating different food, his health improves. And within a few days, 3-4 days, he's back to his virile self again. He's no longer sick after meal times.
Yeah, I guess his color, pigmentation back, like he's looking better.
Yeah, and they just can't seem to put together, what is going on. And then all of a sudden he goes back to the White House and he's sick again. Well, they just figure that it's the warm springs at Georgia that he used to like to soak in to help his condition.
The healing waters.
Yeah, they just kind of put well, maybe that's what's going on. My book will tell you that is not what's going on. FDR was being poisoned from within the White House. And when he left the White House, it stopped. This was pieced together with all of this declassified evidence and deathbed confessions and diaries and all kinds of things. Like I said, I'm a history detective. This is what I do. I go back in history and I pick up snippets of information, and then I go back and solve these deaths. And I do this, and I say this a lot, and I really mean it. If FDR and Elvis and Diana could read my books, I think they'd smile, because I'm trying to do them. I think they've been maligned in history, and I'm trying to set the record straight as to what really happened. And so I'm trying to do them the justice that is their due. And there's not a lot of justice left in this world. So if I can non-malign these people in history. Is non-malign a word? Well, it is now. I made up a word.
Yeah, so, you created it. There it is.
If I can unmalign, non-malign, I don't know what is proper here, but if I can do that, well, then I'm a happy guy. Because I write about some pretty fantastic people, and I think that they need the story needs to be adjusted and corrected as to what really happened. And it's not the evidence that I uncover has nothing to do with what I think. I'm not a huge
like a true investigator or whatnot, you have to step back from your personal feelings, especially when it came to Elvis, one of your favorite people. You have to step back, put your feelings aside, put your personal information aside, and go from what you are reading. Go from the evidence.
Exactly. And, I didn't know anything about FDR growing up. It was not my generation. I was born in 1965. I was born 20 years after the guy died. I didn't know anything about him. I knew about World War II and this and that, and he was president of World War II, and and that's it, And it wasn't until what really piqued my interest in this. I thought it was very suspicious that FDR, Hitler, and Mussolini all died within 18 days of each other.
Wasn't that crazy?
All at the end of the war. And I thought, well, isn't that convenient? And here we go. Allied troops are going after Hitler's bunker. FDR just happens to die. Well, how convenient is that? I said, wait a minute. Whoa. There's got to be more to this story. So this is what I really piqued my interest in getting involved in this.
What's Stalin doing over there? That's what I'm wondering. What's Stalin doing? I'm just kidding.
And sometimes history's more strange than fiction. That's for sure. So all of this is going on.
Fact is indeed stranger than fiction. Man, I've been blown away so many times. Like, no freaking way.
Yeah, I do a very interesting job. I can't wait to dig into the Tesla book, which I will. I was going to do a book on JFK, and I just said, you know what? I'm just not going to do that. Everybody that I know, and I'm friendly with the JFK researchers community. One of my best friends was Mark Lane, who wrote Rush to Judgment, who started the JFK researchers community, who's now passed. Everybody I know who's in that community is fighting. This is not right. And whatever you print, it's not going to be good. It's not going to be right. You're going to be cross-examined and maligned in history for the next 30 years. You know what?
If not forever.
I just don't have time for this.
Right? Ain't nobody got time for that.
I'll tell you the story about what I was going to write, and then I'll get back to this, okay?
Okay.
It's another... FDR is a presidential assassination that not very many people know happened. I don't know of anybody...
I know I told my brother about it, and he's like, no, he wasn't. And I was like, yeah, you got to read this book, dude. Seriously.
My book will definitely change your mind on a lot of things. So my cousin, James Snyder, was a presidential guard for 4 presidents. One of them was JFK. He was not in Dallas at the time. He was in Washington, and his job was to receive the presidential limo and guard it for around 2 hours until the FBI or the federal authorities, I think it was the FBI, took it and did whatever to it. And what the basis of my book was going to be on was the condition of the limousine and the bullet holes in the limousine that no one knows about. Because the pictures that they released are bogus. There was a bullet hole in the hood. There was one through the windshield, and there was one in the front panel of the limousine. There was at least 3 shots from the front, at least, and of course that doesn't fit this narrative.
Yeah, not only the president was struck, but the driver of the car was also struck by these bullets from the front.
Yeah, I spoke to a woman named Donna Beck, and she was in Parkland when all of this happened. She was a nurse in Parkland, and she was working on Connally. And we, JFK, about the only thing we can agree upon is that the guy was killed with a gunshot to the head. All right. No one can agree on anything else. Okay. And I know I'm segueing back out, but I'll come back to FDR. So.
No worries. We got plenty of time.
Oh boy, how do I say this without saying something that I will regret?
Because right.
This will go out to somebody and say, oh no. So I'll just say about the only thing that we can agree upon is that the guy was shot in the head. Because he was shot in the head and he was the president, it overshadows how badly Connally was shot. Connally almost died too. This nurse told me he was not only shot from behind, Connally was shot in the front, to the point where when he would cough, blood would bubble out of him.
Oh my gosh.
He was really, really wounded. And Connally, I don't know how he survived it, but I was fascinated when I stumbled. I'm not going to tell you how I stumbled across her, and she was kind enough to give me that interview. So this is what I was going to write about the shots from the front, and there definitely were shots from the front. So that's what I was going to write about, but you know what? Not doing it. So my book went from 6. My book went from 6 to 5. I don't need to get in the middle of all of this pushing and shoving match, and I just whatever. So I'm over it. I'm not doing a JFK book. You guys can think what you want. I'm not doing it. So the interesting thing about the mirror that hangs on my wall is when I look into it, I don't see anybody else but me. So I have to be happy with what I do.
Yeah, and you sleep good at night, right? Because you're doing the right thing.
But I know that there were. I think that you can take the Warren Commission report right out of the historical side of the library and put it right next to Grimm's fairy tales.
And those are pretty gnarly.
It was. I don't think that they could have possibly lied anymore in anything. So I'll move on from that. FDR is kind of a different thing. A lot of people didn't know the reason why there was not much of a cover up is because no one knew that this guy was murdered, because what he was murdered with was a substance that America didn't know was poisonous. See, we're used to thinking of, in this day and age, we're used to thinking of America being the be all and end all of medical knowledge and wit and wisdom, and we know everything there is to know. Not so in 1940, 1945. Not so. I mean, those countries in Europe, or some of them are almost 2,000 years old. They had a big jump in medical knowledge as to what we knew, especially back then. So this substance that was poisoning him was already outlawed in the Eastern Bloc. They already knew about this, and it was already outlawed. It was 1922 when they outlawed this, and I'm not going to give it away. That's what the book is for. Mm-hmm. I could sit here and tell everybody who murdered them and how they did it and this and that, but you know what? I want you to read the history because it matters. It matters. History matters.
And it's so interesting, the different things that come up, like we never knew, because you did all that freaking digging.
Yeah, and you know what? I'm never going to do it again. I'll do one more book, and then that's it. I've had it with this.
And that's a wrap.
Yeah. Yep. And I had the JFK book written too. And I'm not gonna.
What?
That's it.
Seriously? Yeah, you had the cover and everything out there. When you send me that package with Diana, I keep wanting to say Marilyn, but Diana and Elvis and FDR, and then the anniversary book I already had because you had sent that to me. But I was like, where's the JFK book? Because on your site, I've seen pictures of it. So I was just like, maybe that's the next one he'll send me for the next show or whatever. But yeah, man, you put all that work into that, so many freaking hours, and you're
Yep.
not going to put it out because it's not worth it as far as stress and such.
And it ain't there anymore. It's gone off my site. You know,
Oh wow.
I'm not going to put my nose in that trough. And it is a trough, by the way.
Yeah.
So FDR's got a problem going on. There's someone who's in his White House who's traveling back and forth to the European bloc who suddenly knows about, hey, wait a minute, nobody in America knows about this substance. We can poison this guy and nobody will know about it.
Yeah, didn't he end up moving out of the White House?
Absolutely.
Oh
I'm not going to
man.
give the name away, though. Let's not do that.
No. Well, I'm
Yeah,
not good with names, so you're lucky.
the fellow who was behind the whole thing, absolutely, suddenly and strangely moved out of the White House. But we'll save that for the book. So if you look at the Tehran conference in 1943, the end of November, and you look at the Yalta conference in early February of 45, there's only 27 months between these two, and you can see what the condition that FDR is in. I mean, this guy, by the time he comes around in 1945, he's a walking corpse. His mouth is gaping open. He's got a
Crazy.
strange stare off in the distance. He looks like a gray skeleton. I mean, this guy is, he's really out of it. You got to feel bad for the guy. And of course, we were led to believe that, wow, that he just was, he was just worked to death and this and that. Well,
Yeah,
I'm
it's
sure he
just
was.
stress. It's just stress, that's all.
Yeah, I'm sure we were a little medically ignorant to the point where we didn't know. And it's kind of interesting that Elvis and FDR are both buried on federal ground and under concrete slabs.
And they both turn black. Right?
I don't know. I couldn't verify that with the FDR book. I know somebody else had written that. I don't.
I know, I read it somewhere, and it was around the time I read your book, but that was the thing that really struck me strange. Not only did FDR start to turn black, but then Elvis did as well. Like, to me, that really blew my mind. I'm like, there's some sort of substance that they're not picking up on that both these guys were inoculated with, basically.
Yeah, I know that Elvis was definitely blue black in his face when he was he was discovered. Of course, he was face down. So, I mean, all the corpuscles and things in his face had certainly, through livor mortis, certainly could have taken on that purplish hue. And we can't give away Elvis's cause of death either, but that'll explain the coloring. So, we get back to FDR. This is a very interesting time in history, the biggest war we'd ever seen, and I hope we never see anything like this again. And these opposition leaders are trying to knock each other off like crazy. Hitler had at least 42 attempts on his life from 1933 until 1944.
Didn't he have like a body double going around because of this?
He did. He had more than one body double. As a matter of fact, one was a woman. Believe it or not,
wow.
One was a woman, and she must have been a handsome lady. I'll tell you that. So, one of them came right from inside his group. Erwin Rommel, he was an infantry genius. William Rommel, the Desert Fox, he had a coup to assassinate Hitler from within, and it was discovered. And he was taken from his house, and they made him take a cyanide capsule on July 20th, 1944.
Wow.
So there's all of these people are undergoing these they're trying to take the leaders out. They're all undergoing these assassination attempts. What happened to Churchill was probably Churchill survived dozens of attempts.
I know, and that guy is so freaking slow. How the heck? How is he still walking around? I'm like, there's a Tweedle right there. His name is Churchill. We're going to take him out. He's like, no, you're not.
Smart dude. Another one of my cousins, Winston Churchill. Good old Winnie.
Oh, Winnie.
He was pretty sharp. And there was some, the Brits are pretty good with intel. MI5 and MI6 are just about the best in the world, and they were pretty good back then. So the Germans were smart. There are real 007s in this world, folks. I mean, it just doesn't exist in Hollywood. We have them, other countries have them, and these people they're in deep cover. You know, this is what they do. They are out there to dig up stuff. So what the Germans did, they had somehow infiltrated Churchill's group, and they did a little uh, information on him, and they realized that there's two things this guy liked. Um, One of them was dark chocolate. Winston Churchill liked his dark
Oh,
chocolate.
yes.
So what they did was they made a bomb and they disguised it as a chocolate bomb.
Oh, yes. I remember reading or seeing that somewhere. Holy
And,
shnikes.
and this is right out of Maxwell Smart. You can't make this crap up. You just can't, you know.
Yeah, I would have
Uh,
been dead.
the Nazis are a lot of things. The German people are a lot of things, but stupid is not among them. These are pretty smart, pretty clever folks. And they were working overtime. Um, But MI5 caught it, and it almost worked. What was supposed to happen was they made this chocolate bar, and they dressed it up, you know, make it look fantastic with gold trim and gold leafing. And what was supposed to happen, it was supposed to go in Churchill's chambers. He was supposed to peel off the wrapper, and that was going to ignite the bomb, and it was going to blow his head off. And you know what? It almost worked. These people are really trying overtime to knock each other off. In the case of FDR, you know, it was that one was successful. Um, Stalin later on, 1953, Stalin was poisoned by Beria, who was a member of the Politburo,
Well, I
and
guess what goes around comes around, huh, Stalin?
he actually, oh yeah, Stalin was probably one of the biggest egomaniacs, one of the biggest megalomaniacs
Didn't he
in history.
poison his own wife? He's like, I don't trust you. You have to go. Now I'm going to poison you, okay?
He was just unbelievable. He poisoned his first wife and his second wife, actually.
Oh my god.
Yeah,
Don't marry that guy, okay?
1907. I mean, they were only married for 18 months, and Stalin had her killed, and he destroyed all of her medical records.
Oh my
Um,
gosh. You no longer exist.
he was something. His second wife started questioning what he was doing, and you know she disappeared. He had her killed. It was just unbelievable. He even had his doctor killed. His doctor would give him massages every day, and he was starting to give massages and give medical administration to other people in the Politburo and he thought that he knew too much, so he had him killed.
Oh my god.
To say nothing of the Great Purge, where they had show trials and he just blatantly murdered, an eighth of the entire country. I mean, this guy was, when it comes to being a megalomaniac and a lunatic, I mean, one must really stand in awe of Joseph Stalin.
Yes, indeed.
I mean,
As
this guy,
FDR did.
yeah, he was one of the first Polit members of the Politburo. And what he did is he would somehow pit one against the other and let them knock each other off until he finally took out the last one, and then he ran the country. I mean, it was just unbelievable. And Stalin, Churchill, and Roosevelt, they were allies. But they both knew that Stalin was a temporary ally.
Mm-hmm.
They knew that the big question I'm always asked is, well, why would anybody be interested in knocking off FDR? Because he was so cooperative with Churchill, and he was so cooperative with Stalin, and this and that and the other thing. And here's why. FDR, at the end of the war, he wanted to start the four policemen of the globe: the United States, China, Soviet Union, and Great Britain. These people didn't want to split the world with FDR. They wanted to rule the world. They were not going to play nicely with these people. So there were people behind the scenes who wanted FDR out of the way. He actually stood. He stood in the way of the land grab of the post-war world, So there's a lot of motive going on here. Actually, Operation Long Jump was something that Hitler planned to assassinate the Allied leaders, Churchill, FDR, and Stalin,
Wow.
at the Tehran conference. These guys were going after each other like crazy, and the Nazis were pretty good at it. You know, they got caught a couple of times, but think about the times they didn't get caught, and think about who they probably took out. They were pretty sharp people. So poisonings throughout history, you know, it sounds far out today. You know, oh, yeah, you were poisoned and this and that and the other thing. Um, Poisoning has been used as a legitimate weapon since around, I don't know, 330 BC. Everybody from Rasputin to the Apostle John in the Bible were poisoned. And it reached about the Italian Renaissance in the 14th century is when poisonings really reached their peak as far as being a weapon, a militarized weapon. Even today, food tasters are used.
I know
Hitler
they've
was
been
using,
around for thousands of years. I think that might be the longest running job, really.
yeah,
Food testers.
Hitler was using food testers. Matter of fact, I just read an article that the oldest living food tester for Adolf Hitler finally died. She was in her 90s.
Oh, wow.
I mean, this is heavy duty things. They would use military prisoners.
She was
They would
lucky at
use
Russian roulette.
no kid. They would use military prisoners. They would use um, monkeys.
Oh,
If they had monkeys,
wow.
our systems are similar
Mm-hmm.
in some ways. They would use monkeys. They'd use military prisoners. Sometimes they would use dogs to see what happened to them. And I mean, it became such an issue that today we have the Presidential Food Safety Team. Uh, you know, I mean, there's so many people. There's so many people who have been poisoned throughout history. Turkey's eighth president was poisoned from a glass of lemonade at the Bulgarian embassy in 1993. This is severe stuff. So the food safety team, what they're tasked with is setting up a food safety zone for the president, the dignitaries, and the president's family within the White House. Don't send cupcakes to the president, regardless of who the president is. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
He ain't getting your cupcakes, folks. They're going in the garbage. Everything, all of the food that is made for the president is closely guarded and overseen by the president, the people who guard the president, as well as Secret Service members. And it's very interesting. They watch where the food is made. They oversee everything, and they do this because it is such a problem. Even the air in the White House is filtered. It's a bizarre thing, and all of these people who they use food testers when they go outside of that zone. I know Reagan, Bush the elder, Clinton, Bush the baby Bush, George W. used it.
George
Obama.
W.
I'm sure it just goes on and on and on. I'm sure it happened to Trump too. I happen to know somebody who said there was some assassination attempts on Trump that nobody talked about either. Um,
Yeah. I don't think he
and
wants anybody to know.
there's
Everyone
there's
loves me.
there's some stuff going on, and you know what? They all have attempts. They all have attempts, but I'm not going to get into that. But and if you look at things from a different point of view, we're all being poisoned with GMOs and fluoride, and
Wood
I mean,
chips. We're
food,
the food that we
food
eat.
additives.
Yeah, the food we eat here in the United States is outlawed in most other countries. It's pretty insane what we put in our bodies, and we think we're eating healthy.
Yeah, it's definitely something else. If you take a look at Roman Emperor Claudius, Mark Antony, Napoleon, Cleopatra, Henry VIII, Lincoln, all of these people had attempts on their life with poisoning. So this is not tinfoil hat talk. This is real talk. These things happened. It's hard to. Queen Elizabeth is another one. It's really
I can't
it's a
believe that
it's
woman is still alive. I'm like, seriously, is she a fembot?
your guess is as good as mine. I know there's at least about one body double at play there. So we come back to the cause of death. Okay. The cause of death with FDR is cerebral hemorrhage. True. True. That's not made up. That's true. But it was not brought on by something that was of natural causes. It
Rat
was brought
poisoning can
on.
cause cerebral hemorrhages. Like there's so many different things that can cause your vessels to leak.
Yeah, it was caused by a poisoning. And one of the poisonings, and this is not what happened to FDR, but one of the poisonings, substances they were using to kill people, was warfarin. Warfarin was the big new drug of the day, and it was they were putting it in people's drinks, and their brains were bleeding out.
I think I remember
That's
seeing that in my granny's medicine cabinet. I know I've seen warfarin before.
Yeah, and it's heavy duty stuff. That's what Beria killed Stalin with, was warfarin. And they really, I'm glad they've got a handle on this, and it's tightly controlled, and it needs to be, because I mean they wiped out a lot of people with it. It ended up in rat poisoning, and then of course warfarin was a blood thinner that it's highly controlled, in the medical community right now. So when I do this stuff and I talk about medicine, I have 4 or 5 people that I know who are doctors, one who's a medical examiner, and I will present them with information, and I'll ask them, "Am I right in assuming this?" I really have to get other professionals involved in this, because I want to do the best work that I possibly can, you know. And I'd be lying if I said that, I knew everything there is to know. Um, I like to think of what I do as art, even though it might be finger painting. But I have to do the best art that I can do. So I have to get some other professionals involved. So if you look at FDR from 1943 to 1945 at the two conferences, totally different guy. 45, this guy
It
really,
is insane the difference.
the pictures are all in my book. He's definitely suffering from an affliction. How this guy's alive, I'm sure I have no idea. And all of a sudden, everyone around him is dying of a cerebral hemorrhage. General Paul Watson, one of FDR's closest generals, guess what? Dies coming back from the Alta conference of a cerebral hemorrhage. As a matter of fact, at the Alta conference, they were enjoying a steak and potato dinner. All of the allies and all of their people, their closely guarded heads of state, were all at this dinner. From America, FDR was there. Harry Hopkins was there. FDR started to turn pale. He almost turned green. He started to vomit. He started sweating, and Harry Hopkins had to get him out of the room. Someone tried to poison him at Yalta, and no one talks about this. This is the other side of history. This, like I said, this is not tinfoil hat conspiracy talk, folks. This is real talk. This happened. So all of these people in and around FDR start to suffer poisoning, and it's really bizarre when you stop to think about this can happen. Why is no one screening these people? I mean, how can you have Russian spies around the president in the close proximity to the president when he dies? How is this possible? That could never happen today. Never. It's impossible. We've learned so many things.
Yeah, there's people that like break in and try to get onto the lawn and do other random things like that. But yeah, it's very close knit, closed down. Even in pickups and everything, I don't know. Things are insanely, very much protected for reasons. There's crazy people out there. There's people that want you dead all the freaking time, especially when you're in politics. I'm not surprised
Sorry,
about the whole Trump thing.
my mic was malfunctioning there for
Oh,
a
no
minute.
worries. Yeah, you got quiet. I was like, wow, he's waiting for me to say something.
I'm back.
He's back.
So with all of with all of my books, what I do is I gather all of the suspects and I put them in a group and I screen them through the elements of a crime: motive, means, and opportunity. Who was around this person? Who had the motive to do this? Who had the opportunity to do this? There are people who might want to kill people in power who don't have the opportunity to do it. I might want to knock off somebody in Yugoslavia, but I don't have the means in which to do so. So I screen them through motive, means, and opportunity. And, in the end, the person is left who the evidence points to. So it's very, very interesting stuff. Other mysterious poisonings that happened other than Major General Watson. I already spoke about what happened at the Alta Conference to FDR. Personal secretary Marvin McIntyre, no relation to his doctor, Ross McIntyre. He died of a cerebral hemorrhage right about the same time that FDR started to have odd symptoms. And he died of a cerebral hemorrhage with the same symptoms that FDR was having.
Yeah, and it makes me wonder, where was he sitting at the dinner table, and why exactly would they go after him?
I don't think that, well, I'm going to regret saying this, but as good as Churchill was in war, FDR's country was a lot more powerful. We had more resources. Churchill, like Japan, they were limited as to the resources that they had. This is why we did the Lend-Lease program, because we had resources and resources and resources, and we had the mass production facilities in mass that those countries didn't have. So they wanted to get FDR out of the way because behind him was a new vice president that they thought wasn't very bright. They didn't think that Truman was very bright at all.
I don't know. I think he was just very quiet.
Exactly. And if they underestimated Harry Truman, I think they missed their guess.
Yeah, I think they really messed up there.
So they wanted FDR out of the way because FDR was supporting the war effort for Churchill. Getting Churchill out of the way didn't really accomplish much. But it was America's military might and their resources and their manufacturing, their mass industrial manufacturing. That was the biggest threat. So taking Churchill out really wouldn't, that's kind of like killing the tail. You're not killing the head there.
Yeah, and you don't want the queen after you. Like, I don't know. Leave the guy alone. Really. He's a connoisseur of brandy and politics. He's really not a danger. Like, he wanted to be more active like the president and other people, but he just wasn't. I don't know. He didn't have that affect like FDR did and other people. I think he was very jealous of Stalin and the way that FDR looked up to him and kind of felt like the kid left out. But not saying he wasn't a big person, but I think, he kind of had his feelers hurt and he just was not that type. He did not fit into that sort of realm.
A lot of people suspected that Stalin killed FDR.
Yeah.
A lot of people suspected that. I ran across that numerous times. So the book will spell it out. I'm not going to tell you who actually did the deed. I want you to read it and learn the history. It's very interesting, though, as the war ended, Churchill gets bounced out of power. And that was due in large part by a force inside Britain that was being controlled by some other people. So FDR and Churchill got along okay. FDR and Stalin got along okay. I think that FDR and Churchill got along better, but at the end of the war, Britain basically got nothing.
Yeah, as time passed, they kind of grew apart, and that's where I was talking about how he had that like kid left out on the playground sort of thing going on. At first, they were really close, but towards the end, he was just like, "What the heck? Like, why am I not close with him like I was before?" I don't know. A lot of things really changed over time between the two of them.
it was the war to end all wars. As a matter of fact, Stalin came out and accused the Churchill gang of taking out FDR. It's a very interesting situation where he dies at Warm Springs, Georgia, and I lay it out pretty well in this book. It was 69 hours, death to grave. They could not. There was no autopsy. They could not get this guy in the ground fast enough.
No, and Eleanor would have been the one to order an autopsy, right? And she didn't need an autopsy.
Well, you know what's interesting about Eleanor? She's a fascinating lady. There was no autopsy. It is rumored that the corpse turned colors. I don't know that. I couldn't verify that. I didn't put that in there. It's possible. I don't know.
That's crazy. I'm trying to figure out where I read that because I'm like, man, I thought I read it in your book, but obviously not.
All dead bodies eventually change color, but if he turned black or not, I don't know. That's one that's beyond me. But Dr. Paulin was called to the site where he died, and he's a physician out of Atlanta who's summoned there, and he concurred with the other doctors at his bedside that he had suffered indeed a cerebral hemorrhage. The cause of death was correct, folks, but it was not brought on by a natural circumstance. It was everything you have result and cause. Okay, you have the result, which is the cerebral hemorrhage. The cause of it could be anything, and this is what they're not telling you. Why? Because they're not hiding anything from you. They didn't know. History actually revealed what happened years and years later. So, it's interesting thing. No autopsy, nothing. They get this guy in the ground, and you would think, look at how they paraded Lincoln's body around the country.
Right? That was insane.
They put him on trains and wagons and everything, and everybody got to look at this guy.
That to me is so disrespectful and detrimental, but that was entertainment. That was the way things were back in those days. You really didn't have TV shows and other things to watch. Let's go gaze at the president's dead body.
It's crazy stuff. So, here we are, FDR, who, he'd done so many fireside chats and he had guided America through so many things that people responded like it was a death in the family. The country really, really was grieving. And 69 hours, which is an incredibly fast speed from death to grave, they couldn't get him in the ground fast enough.
I know.
And I think that they knew something was going on. I think that they had suspected it. I don't think that they had any idea what was going on at the time, and they certainly aren't going to tell you now. I had raised on one show, and people flipped out. I said, why don't we just exhume Elvis and FDR and get it over with?
Right? Why not?
And people went crazy. It was I've never had such a response. It would
answer so many unanswered questions. It would quell so many conspiracy theories, whatever the heck you want to call it. These different theories that are going around, and especially the fact that Elvis is out and about and on an island with all these other stars that have faked their own deaths. This would quell so many questions, including what exactly killed this person.
Well, Elvis's casket was very interesting. It was the same casket as his mother's. And with one exception, it had hidden compartments in it. And those compartments were, there were things put in those compartments with the expectation that at some point the body would be exhumed and they would need to see those things.
Oh, a time capsule.
Very interesting. So it looked like Gladys's casket, but it really wasn't exactly the same.
Was Vernon the one that did all that, or who did that?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yep. Vernon knew immediately with everything that was going on behind the scenes with Elvis and the FBI, and he got squashed between the mob and the FBI, and Vernon knew immediately who killed him.
Yeah, they.
Yep, absolutely.
Not one person, but they.
They, exactly. And that's a very telling statement that came right out of his mouth when he found his son.
They killed my boy.
Now, what's interesting about parallel between FDR's murder and Elvis's murder, the aggrieved party, both of them did a similar thing. Vernon Presley, Elvis Presley's father, hired 2 private investigators to find the murderer and to investigate what really happened. 12 years after FDR dies, 1945. He dies in 45. 1957, Eleanor Roosevelt is so fed up with hearing that he was murdered, she hires a private investigator.
Yeah, but by that time it was kind of too late, wasn't it?
Well, what happened was the private investigator starts getting the runaround within the annals of the American government. Like a year and a half worth of runaround. And finally, someone had to tell him and break the news. The FDR's medical records are gone. They were held at Bethesda. They were in a locked cabinet in Bethesda, and they're gone. Someone stole them. We have nothing to give you. Bethesda is an interesting thing where all kinds of things turn up missing, including JFK's brain, which has never been recovered.
It's a magical black hole.
Yeah, it's magical things happen at Bethesda that don't happen anywhere else. So, Eleanor she was furious.
On that note, let's pause there. Eleanor was furious. We do have to go to our second music break. I just looked at the clock and I'm like, holy shnikes. We're almost at the top of the hour. So, yeah, please pause there and we'll continue this next coming hour right after the break. This break is going to be 16 minutes long. We have Cockroach from the UK with We Play House. We have Fireline Kiss with Your Eyes, and then we have Miss Mia Savage with Not a Phase. You guys don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after this musical break.
We Play House. We Play House.
Good evening, and thank you so much for joining us this evening on We Are Paradox Media's Late Night in the Rockies. This evening, we are joined by author Stephen B Ubaney, one of my favorite artists. It's so easy to get into his books. Even this FDR book, like there's so many amazing different gems of information that are going on there because of all the hours that you put into this. Like, this is really not just a project, but a passion, and it's pretty amazing the things that you have dug up.
Well, it has to be a passion because you're not going to make any money off of it. I'll tell you that. There's so much time. I got news for everybody. I mean, there's so much time in these books, thousands and thousands and thousands of hours. They'll never be profitable. They never will be. I do it. That's not why I do it. If I sell a book, great. If I don't, great. I'd rather sell a book than not sell a book. But you know what? For me, it's more about doing the right thing and making sure the right information gets out. Because after 75, 80 years of nonsense, somebody out there has to tell the truth. I mean, the guy was murdered, and it boggles my mind. And even, like I said before the break, and I'll come back to it, even FDR's wife, Eleanor, and cousin, Eleanor, knew that he was murdered. She was hearing rumors upon rumors upon rumors until the point where some doctors were now talking about it. Because now what FDR died from, what he was poisoned with, was now illegal in the country. Now the information had caught up to what had happened. 12 years is a long time. Now all of a sudden they're saying, maybe there was truth to this rumor that he was poisoned from his enemies inside the White House. And, so she was really on the bandwagon, and they got nothing. Medical records were stolen. They were stolen from locked files at Bethesda, and 4 people had those keys. So that's where the plot really thickens. I can tell everybody the suspects in the book and who they got screened out. Believe it or not, Eleanor Roosevelt was a suspect.
Yeah, generally, it's the husband or the wife. Makes total complete sense.
It has nothing to do with what I feel of these people, but she was a suspect. Why? Again, she was being cheated on, and it was blatant, and it was from within the White House. She was a very active lady. She was all over the White House. She knew everything that was going on, and she was not only screwing around with Lucy Mercer, which was her social secretary. There were other people he was playing around with in the White House, and she was not very necessarily happy about it. So she was the first suspect. Missy LeHand it was revealed that they had an affair. She was also a suspect in my book, for the same reason that Eleanor was a suspect. Lucy Mercer, same thing. They had an affair that lasted 30 years. And of course, no one knew this. Letters surface. It's kind of hard to ignore it. Lucy Mercer was the one who actually requested Elizabeth paint his portrait, and she was at Warm Springs, Georgia, when FDR died. They were quite hot and heavy. Harry Hopkins is another suspect in my book that had to be screened out. He was one of the people who was really fundamental to, he was a right-hand man of the president. It was hard for FDR to travel because of his physical impairment. So a lot of times Harry Hopkins would go back and forth to Europe and do things for him. And there were times when actually Harry Hopkins started to side more with other world leaders than with FDR. And that also was revealed later on as the decades go by. He was a key policymaker in the Lend-Lease program. He attended conferences between Churchill, of course, and Stalin and FDR. He was the one that pulled FDR out of the meeting when he became violently ill at Yalta. And I think they tried to kill him at Yalta. And I say they because I think there was other people involved. I'll get into more of that in the book. Elizabeth Shumatoff, the painter, definitely a suspect, just like Nicholas Robbins. or Nicholas Cobbins or Nicholas Kubakinski, whatever one of the three names you want to call this guy. He was also a suspect. These two people were in the company of the higher end people of the day, who would have paid them handsomely to kill FDR so they could start making money again. All of these are motives. Henrietta Nesbitt, the White House chef. She was a very close friend to Eleanor Roosevelt. She was furious with FDR because of his infidelities inside the White House. Again, this is a very tight-knit group of people. Everybody knew what was going on. Howell Krim, he's an usher at the White House. He knew the FDR family on a personal level. He was accused of being a Soviet spy. Winston Churchill. There were a lot of people who had credible stories that Winston Churchill's group had FDR killed. Arthur Prettyman, who was also at Warm Springs, Georgia, and he was U.S. Chief Petty Officer, and he was also FDR's valet, personal valet. Used to help bathe the man, used to help get him dressed, because FDR just was unable to do these things. So all of these people are screened out as suspects in my book. They start out and they get screened for motive, means, and opportunity. And in the end, you will know the one person who did it and how they did it. And I think how they did it and what they used, the poisoning that they used, is so fantastic, because today we would be able to say, oh, yeah, that's what it is. Not so back then. Not so. So FDR is definitely a president that was assassinated that no one knows was assassinated, because of the technology of the day wasn't up to snuff. You know, there's a lot of cowboys that were killed that are buried in graves that, you know, CSI didn't exist back then. You know, they just went to a different country or a different county or a different state and changed their name. You know,
looks like a booger got him. I'm just kidding.
Yeah. There's a lot of things buried to the sands of time that we just can't go back, and this was one of them. He was rubbed out in the middle of the biggest war we'd ever had, and I hope we ever do have. Other presidents, Warren Harding. No one talks about this. I almost wrote a book on Warren Harding. Warren Harding, he was murdered. He was poisoned.
Yeah, and I like how in some of your books, especially towards the end, you will make notes like this of different people of interest to you that you've thought about writing about and different things going on in their lives. So I really like that aspect of your writing as well.
Yep. President Harding was president for a very short time, and he was caught up in the Teapot Dome scandal, and he died very suspiciously. Teddy Roosevelt, they tried to kill Teddy Roosevelt. And again, nobody talks about these things. You know, these are not taught. We rely on our professors and our teachers to teach us everything that we need to know. Wrong. The books are actually, some of them are wrong now. I've seen some history books that have been written quite recently, and they're warping.
It is freaking amazing. It blows my mind, the things that they've sold to us throughout our time in school, and the things they continue to try to sell to our kids. Like, it's just mind-blowing.
Well, to the victor go the spoils.
Right? They write history. The winner writes the history.
Well, you know, I said it before, Napoleon has the ultimate quote that history is the lie agreed upon.
Mm-hmm.
And that's true. One of my friends has little ones in school, and they're teaching them now in 3rd and 4th grade that the English came to America to take advantage of the Indians.
Oh, yeah. They knew they were here. That was their sole purpose. You know, why not? Give me a break.
They must have saw it on CNN. I have no idea how they were here. You know?
Right.
They were building ships under the cover of night to set sail, because people were so mistreated in England. And matter of fact, my ancestors came over on the Mayflower. You know, I mean, I know what I'm talking about. And, you know, it's not like, how the hell did they know that the Indians were here? They didn't. They had no clue. They landed and they said, "Oh my God, look at these people." And the Indians said, "Look at these people. Look at how funny they're dressed." That's how they knew. They didn't know
They
how
look
to.
really sick.
It's really something. It's weird because the first few years, the Indians and the Pilgrims, they actually got along pretty well. They didn't have problems until later on. Teddy Roosevelt was another, just like FDR, was another president that was almost assassinated, even though FDR was assassinated. Teddy Roosevelt was doing a speech, and he had his speech rolled up and put in his breast pocket, and somebody shot him. And the speech was so thick, it stopped the bullet. You can't make this up. That's what I mean. History's awesome. And he said in the speech, "You're not going to kill this bull moose." And that's when the Bull Moose Party was started. He ran on the Bull Moose Party. That's how that was started.
That's pretty badass.
Yeah, he was quite an interesting fella. So there's a lot in history. There's a lot in this book, and I'm not gonna let you guys know who murdered him. I'm not gonna come out and say this, but
you're gonna have to buy the book and read it, because, like I said, there's little gems of history, little things you'd never even know had you not read it in this book. Man, so many hours you've spent on this stuff. Like, to me, it's just mind blowing.
It's it's fascinating that everybody has a favorite book. Some people love the Elvis books. Some people love the FDR book. I have some people who say, the FDR book is my favorite book. You hated the FDR book.
I did not hate it. Okay, so, and I was thinking about this when I went on my potty break. I was like, man, he thinks I hate this book, and I don't, because, look, I've retained information. If I hated it, I would not have retained anything. Yes, it took me a little more to get into than Elvis and Diana, but how could it not? Elvis and Diana, like you said, on our perspective of time and stasis and whatnot, more in my realm of things I know about, things that I was raised hearing and seeing and watching, and, the whole fairy tale wedding and all this other stuff. Like, my mom was totally sucked into the TV for that. I did not hate the FDR book. I have to tell you, I did not hate it. Hate is a bad word. No, it was harder for me to get into it than it was the Elvis and Diana thing. And I think it was the excitement of Elvis's life and Diana's life, and yes, FDR's life. I really looked up to him as a president, like what he went through with polio, how hard he worked, and the different things he did to make himself appear stronger. And I think he really was a strong individual. It was just kind of difficult for me to get into it. Well, but I did enjoy it. I did.
Well, good. I'm glad. It's not our time period. It was
exactly
the time before our time. And I think that there's so much history that has been lost now that people have a problem. And so, but I had some people say, "Man, this is the best book I ever read on this subject. I love this book." And other people say, "I love the Elvis book." And now people are saying, "I love the Diana book." Hey, as long as they love something I write. My books are weird. I keep them short and I keep them common English because people are busy. I keep them around 200 pages, and I keep the print big. I don't. An Indian chief once said it takes few words to say the truth. Get to the point. Nobody wants to read a 2,000-page book that meanders around forever. And I wouldn't write that sort of book anyway. But you have to get to the point. You have to tell people what they need to know and move on. For me, it's about waking people up, because if you don't know your history, you're going to repeat it. Okay? So, my books are different. They're also very cross-genre.
Yeah, and that's my favorite saying too. If you do not learn history, because I've had my kids be like, "Mom, why do I need to learn this stuff? Like, this happened so long ago." If you don't learn from history, we're doomed to repeat it. And this has been proven time and time again from things that they've hidden from us, and then how things are repeated.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You will repeat it if you don't remember it. And this generation of World War II is now gone. There are very few of them left. And guess what we're talking about again? Socialism and communism. We haven't learned the lesson yet.
I know there's people out there today saying Biden is a communist. Like, they're trying to get us into communism the way they're giving us these stimuluses, etc., etc. Like, it does kind of look like it, doesn't it?
Yeah, and we just have not learned those lessons because we don't care to read that because it's history. It comes up every, I don't know, every 80 years, every 90 years, just long enough for the generation who suffered through it to disappear. And guess what? Khrushchev was right. America's going to rot from within.
Mm-hmm.
He said then your great grandchildren are going to live under communism and they're never going to know it.
Yeah, they won't have a clue.
Very interesting stuff. So this is a very interesting book series. I hope you find something that you like. Well, like I said, I sell the bananas out of these books, so I'm not trying to get a book sale, but there are information in there that everybody go to whomurderedbooks.com. And I'll tell you what, we're 22 years into the 21st century, and you can still get a present for somebody for around $20. It's impossible to believe.
That's pretty epic.
You can't get anything for $20, but I'll tell you what, if you know somebody who's into history or celebrity deaths or mystery or conspiracy or true crime or cold case, this kind of bridges all of those genres. And there's something in there that somebody will like. So get this word out. Give this book to somebody. All right. The next book will be on, I'm taking an elongated break because, yes, I'm suffering from burnout.
I know. And you've done such a good job and you love it. But at the same time, sometimes enough is enough. Well,
I did 87 shows last year.
I can't believe how much you do. I would be totally burnt out too.
And I'm getting to the point where, I might go fishing here for a while. My next book is going to be on Nikola Tesla. And I know you're excited about that book. And
I'm so excited.
I'm kind of curious as to why you're excited about that one. It's half written, by the way.
I love Tesla. He's always intrigued me. Just the way he came out with energy, the whole lights that he had at the certain fair thing they had going on, and then the way Edison came through and was like, "Oh, but look at this," Tesla was looking out for us. He knew free energy for all. And I could see different things that could go wrong, like cancer and other crazy things. But still, we get it from electricity and other things anyways. But free. They can't have that. They got to charge for it. You got to make money off of what the people are using. And that's not the way Tesla was. Tesla, he received so much information. I do believe he was in contact with those damn Allens. I do believe that he was receiving revelation and different things, and he was a prophet of sorts as far as different designs and technology and things that he was taking in and willing to just give to us. Everybody else had to take it, and just his life, the way he thought of us women as succubuses because we just steal his intelligent energy. And then how he kind of withdrew in his latter years because of the ways that he was attacked and ways that he was just put out rough and tumble because of Edison and other people that were making the money, and he's not. He's looking for the welfare of all, and that's what I really loved about him. He was out there to help us, and he was so smart, so intelligent, so beautiful. Then he died in a very lonely relative way, and then his crates and crates and crates of information disappear, and there's 8 left. Seriously? There was about 50 something or whatever crates here before, now there's 8. Why didn't they take them all? Maybe because they're if we leave a few, they won't even notice. I don't know. It's just so epic and mind-blowing, and I want to hear what you have to say because I know how much you dig into things and how relative the information is and how true and factual. You're not just oh, well, so-and-so said this. You're actually going to the archives and you're digging and you're doing all this stuff and writing these epic books. I love them all.
Well, great. I'm glad to hear that. I'm interested in writing the Tesla book, and I know I live around the Niagara Falls area, and I'm obviously I don't live in Canada. I live in the New York side, and I've been in contact with some people in Canada because I wanted to tour the remains of what's up there. There's a statue on the Canadian side of the falls of Nikola Tesla.
That's
and it
awesome.
says what he did and everything, and it has the site. I wanted to get a private tour. I wanted to
Mm-hmm.
get some pictures in there that nobody had, and I wanted to get up there with another researcher who's been on the History Channel a bunch, named Mark Seifer, who's I've been in contact with a couple times. Really, really nice man. And you know what? Depending on who you talk to, is how far you'll get. I talked to two different people. Two people said, "Yeah, there's stuff up here that we can let you tour and take pictures of. Let me turn you on to my supervisor." The supervisor said, "No, there's." That's a little bizarre.
The
Uh,
supervisor said, no, you broke up because the powers that be don't want people to hear that. So they said, what?
the two people I spoke with said, "Yeah, there's the remains of what he was using here for a station or a facility."
Do you know
And they
what?
said, "Well, I'll put you in touch with our supervisor." And when I got contacted by the supervisor said there was nothing up there.
Hmm.
It's like, well, is it there or isn't it? I mean, it's not a multiple choice question. It's like, is it or isn't it? Up and down means yes, side to side means no. Tell me what it is. Out in his laboratory was out in the remains of it is an empty field out in Colorado Springs. There's a little plaque out there. This is where Nikola Tesla's thing would be,
I
and it's gone.
have a little gem
There's
of
nothing.
information that will blow your mind. Guess what? So we
Absolutely.
we did
Go
a
ahead.
security gig up in Rico, and right outside of Rico, Colorado, is a little community that is run off of Tesla power. This place is still up and running, and at the beginning of this little neighborhood that I actually trespassed in because I'm like, I have to see this for myself. But at the very beginning, there's a building, and you look in there, and there's these little concrete walls, and it's just an empty space, and there's little concrete walls, and I'm like, what's inside of those little concrete, whatever's going on? I don't see the Tesla coil. I don't see anything else. Like, what is in there that is powering this neighborhood that Tesla created? And so then I go up in my Toyota SR5 four-wheel drive. I believe it was an 84. And I'm going through the neighborhood, and everybody's like looking out their windows at me. And I'm like, oh my God, getting really nervous because people don't recognize me. They know I'm an outsider and I'm inside their neighborhood. And people actually started following me until I left the neighborhood. But they were all electrically powered. There was no cables, no nothing. Like, this was Tesla energy. And so there is still a little community that's being powered by it. So if you ever come to Colorado, let me know and I will take you up there and I will show you this neighborhood. And maybe you could see what I couldn't find because I could not find the coils. I could not find anything. Maybe they're hidden in the trees or something, but they weren't in that building. There was little concrete walls surrounding something not large enough to be a coil. I don't know if it's some other thing that he came across. I don't know. It's pretty intriguing.
Yeah, there's. I might take you up on that one of these days, actually. Um, I know that in Texas there's a couple Tesla towers, and I believe they're functioning. So here's a guy who was doing Wi-Fi long before anybody knew what Wi-Fi was talking about, wireless energy. And here we are being held back by the people, by the powers that be. We're being held back to running wires and internal combustion engines. Our society is being held back. We should have robots doing our laundry now. We're 22
I
years
know.
into the
Where's my fucking
21st
Rosie
century.
robot?
I mean, and we're being held back because people who hold the monopolies are using antiquated technology. It's really quite sad when you stop and think about it. But FDR and Tesla Connect, and this is something that no one knows about. FDR and Tesla Connect. Tesla was trying to sell his death ray technology to the United States government because this thing could wipe out fleets of planes and cities. This thing was really it was really something else. So he got snubbed, absolutely snubbed. They wanted nothing to do with him. They were going with the Manhattan Project and they were going towards the nuclear bomb and this and that and the other thing. Why? Because it was easier for them to do, because they, through Operation Paperclip, at the end of the war, they had they gave basically a free ticket to the German scientists, Werner von Braun being one of them. Bring your stuff over here, help us win the war, and we won't prosecute you for war crimes. So they already had the heavy water experiments. We were just finishing them. We had our own, but I don't think we're as far as advanced as they were. So here's Tesla saying, hey, look, this death ray will wipe out all kinds of things. They were further along with the nuclear technology in a couple of top secret projects. So Tesla got to the point where here's a guy who needs this next big project. He really wanted to make his. He said, "Hey, look, I've come up with all these benevolent projects for mankind. You're not interested in that. Let's see if I can sell a war project." So the United States government turned him down. So he started to pitch this to other countries. This is where the plot really thickens with Tesla. One of the people he was talking to was Stalin, who was a temporary ally of us in World War II. Stalin very much had his eye on the post-war world. So you have to ask yourself, did Stalin's operatives kill him?
Right.
So the U.S. couldn't get the information? Did the U.S. operatives kill him so he couldn't do business with Stalin? The plot really thickens around him. There are signs of a struggle. His research is gone. Did one of his helpers or assistants steal his research material?
That would be for the best. Like maybe they hid it out somewhere or whatever. Because where is this technology? Unless it's like cell phones and different things we're using today. I mean, where is this technology? Where did all these crates go? Where is this information?
And that is the $64,000 question. Number one, we don't know what was in it. And that we might be using the technology today. We don't know.
Man, I could really use that $64,000 right now.
And we don't know, what it was, and we don't know who's got it, and if we're using it or not. So you have to ask yourself, like I said, was it the U.S. government who killed him so he couldn't do business with Stalin and other countries?
Was it Edison?
There's a lot of people. Was it someone who there's a lot of people here. The plot is really thickening around Tesla, and this is one of the things that really sparked my interest in this project. That's going to be a book and a half, and some people, you're not going to please everybody. Some people like everything that I do, and some people just don't, and I'm not going to satisfy everybody. All I can do is tell the truth. Look at when God goes to bed tonight, he's going to hear people halfway around the world begging to stop the rain. And God bless you.
Thank you. I was muted so nobody heard it but you, but thank you so much. I really appreciate your blessing. Because holy shnikes, that just came out of nowhere. 2 sneezes. Working on number 3.
So, like I said, pardon me, when God goes to bed tonight, he's going to hear people on one side of the world begging to stop the rain, and the other side of the world begging for rain. Even God can't satisfy everybody. So I'm just going to do the best job I can and tell the truth on the Tesla subject and others, and I'm going to let the world turn. And if you do the right thing, one day it'll matter. It really will.
It really does.
I might be coaxed into doing one more.
I bet you'll do it after you go on your fishing expeditions and, touring Tesla communities and other things. You're just going to miss it so much because that's how you've spent your time for so long, and that has been your passion. And yes, we all need to take a break so we don't burn out. But
I've been doing this I started researching the Elvis book, Who Murdered Elvis. I started and boy, that one has set the world on fire. You talk controversy.
Hunka burn and live.
I didn't want that. I was the last person who wanted to know that information, and I had to get it out there because I want to catch the guy. So
or guys.
Same thing, right? The same thing with. So I've been doing this for 12 years now. 15 years actually. 15 years ago, I started research.
It's like raising a kid. Here you are, almost at
Yeah.
18.
Right, and it's a substantial chunk of life. So, um, I'll do the Tesla book, and I think I'll go away. One of my friends was trying to talk me into doing a Martin Luther King thing, and here's
That is
why.
one because the family even says the guy that they convicted, that they say killed MLK, is not really the guy. Even the family doesn't believe it.
I have a mutual friend with James Earl Ray's brother. Um, I have contact to the family, to the King family, through mutual friends. I don't know these people. Um, and it intersects with the Elvis book. Okay. 9 years before, Jerry T. Francisco botched the Elvis Presley autopsy, he botched Martin Luther King's autopsy. He mangled that
Go
corpse.
figure.
Yeah, he mangled that corpse so bad. This is terrible to talk about, but I have to. There
Yeah.
was no way for anybody to determine the entrance of the bullet in Martin Luther King's corpse. And how did I know this? It comes up again. Mark Lane, who is a very high-profile lawyer in Charlottesville, Virginia, ended up being friends of mine, who started the JFK research community with his work in 1964, Rush to Judgment. Okay, ended up being a friend with Mark's, and I won't bore everybody with how long or why, but he represented James Earl Ray, and they basically, well, they used some tactics that they shouldn't have to make James Earl Ray confess to doing something that he didn't confess to. He also wasn't smart enough to realize what he was confessing to.
Underhanded police work, man. It really does not pay off. Do your
Yeah,
job correctly. Come on.
yeah, and it was very, let's just say it was not good. Um, so there's only one witness to the Martin Luther King thing, and she was taken by police, and she ended up in, and this was covered in, Mark Lane did a book on this, code name Zorro. That was FBI's code name for Martin Luther King, code name Zorro. And the only witness was taken and put into a mental institution under an assumed name. And every time Mark went to find her, they changed her to a different facility under a different name. And they
Yeah,
kept
who's trying
changing.
to hide something? Like, give me a break.
And he finally caught up with her, and he finally got the interview with her, and he said beyond question, the person who shot Martin Luther King was not James Earl Ray.
No, it
So
wasn't.
um, I've been thinking about that one. I don't know if I'm going to put my nose in that trough
You
either.
know what? I think that would be the most epic book that you could tie this series off with. You know, you thought about FDR. There's so much drama and so much bullshit, and people still today trying to keep people quiet about that book. So I can see you not doing the Kennedy book for sure. But if you tied your series off, even if you took like a 3 or 4 year, uh, you know, break and went fishing and did different things to make your soul happy, that'd be awesome. Reignite that light, reignite that passion, and then come back and write that book. Like, for me, that would be the one to tie off the series. I don't know. It just feels so perfect.
We'll see what happens with that. Kennedy, I'm so furious with those people. All they do is
I
fight and
know.
argue. And
It's
they're
so
such
bad.
nice people. I mean, they're great people in that community, and they all get along personally, but they fight. And
Yeah,
they
this
fight and
is
fight. And
Camelot. There's no fighting allowed in Camelot.
they fight more than they solve anything. I said this at one conference. I had to say a couple words, and I don't speak at these conferences because I'm just not that important enough in their world, actually. There are people who know way more about that than I do, but I had to introduce somebody, and I put my 2 cents in for what it was worth. I said, if JFK walked through that door right now, and he asked you all what you did to solve his murder, what would you tell him? And the place got really quiet because everyone is holding their own little piece of information. It's a little cottage industry. They're publishing their own books, and no one's putting everything together to get this done. And it's infuriating to me that all they've done is profit from it, and no
Mm-hmm.
one's doing the right thing. So I just couldn't put my nose in that trough, and it is a trough. That doesn't exist with Elvis. That doesn't exist with FDR. Nobody knew FDR was murdered. I think there might have been a conspiracy theory out there, and I hate those two words.
I know, it's terrible.
But I mean, with Martin Luther King, the same thing. All these people are intertwined with all of these things, and I really want to move on to write other things. I'll tell you what, if you want a King thing, I'll write it with you.
If what? You kind of broke up a little bit.
Am I having microphone problems?
You sound good now.
Okay, so I'll tell you what, if you want me to do the Martin Luther King book, write it with me.
Okay, I'll do it. Yes.
I'll let you write half of the book, and I'll write the second half of the book.
Oh wow.
Because I am at my end of spending 10,000 hours on a book.
We can split it.
You sound like you're into it, so.
Yeah, I am so intrigued and enthralled and interested, and man, what an epic proposition. Seriously, how could I say no?
The FDR book, it's funny how the FDR book and the Tesla book collide, and no one knows about this. No one knows that Tesla was trying to get the United States government to use his weaponry with electricity to just basically vaporize the enemy. No one knows this information.
Remember in the 80s when people were spontaneously combusting?
Yeah, can you order that on people?
If I figured it out, I'll let you know.
I know a couple people who could spontaneously combust, and I wouldn't shed
Yeah, me too.
Couple of them come to mind that I won't mention, but all of these things overlap. It's amazing when you look at the circumstances surrounding all of the cover-ups, the sanitized death scene, just like FDR here.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, there was no autopsy. Magically, no one cared what killed the guy.
No, Eleanor's like, no, we gotta get him in the ground as soon as possible. Let's do this.
Makes no sense.
And then, I don't know, I think she was kind of trying to cover her tracks a little bit, being like, oh, let's do this investigation because everybody keeps saying things. And it went nowhere. Not only did it go nowhere, things disappeared. I don't know. May not have been her. Could have been somebody else. She could have been colluding. I'm not sure. But...
Yep, absolutely. Either, if you really want to confuse investigators, either remove evidence or plant new evidence.
Yeah, I think the planting of it is something that'll really throw an investigator off.
Because their minds will spin out of control. And Elvis Presley, they planted syringes with no needle, and it drove them crazy. They could not figure out, there was no needle marks on Elvis. Not one.
There shouldn't have been, because he was not a needle user. This is just a theory that people are saying, just to make you think he was some sort of junkie addict. Like, no.
The more fantastic a story is, the easier it sells.
Right.
People are more apt to believe that Elvis Presley's alive walking out there around. You know, he's our new Bigfoot. They have little pictures of him walking.
Well, did you see how hairy he got right before he died? I could see him kind of being like Bigfoot. I'm just kidding.
It's just, I mean, it's just so crazy. I mean, these people need to stop. First of all, they need to grow up, and they need to stop deluding themselves.
Well, also, there's the people out there that are acting like they're Elvis. Like, I saw this guy that was living in Tennessee. I think he was like somewhat homeless, and this guy would go around and he'd be singing, and he had his hair all fluffed out, and he did look like Elvis if Elvis was alive today. But these could be one of the people back in the day that were his doppelganger or whatever, that were hired to take over in these films and pictures and productions and other things where he just didn't have the time or energy or the spirit to do it anymore. Like, bring in the clones. So this guy could have been one of the past clones or something, being like, hey, could you imagine how much money I could rake in right now saying I'm Elvis?
Well, Elvis Presley, he also used those people through his movies, and then afterwards.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would too.
He used as his body doubles because the guy had no break from the world.
They were literally burning him out.
He would plop a body double and make him come out and wave to the fans and plop him in a body double in a limousine and take off, and then 20 minutes later, Elvis would take off somewhere else. Princess Diana did the same thing. All those pictures they saw in my book, Who Murdered Diana, nobody knew this until I brought it out. That she had a body double. Some of the pictures that were snapped of her on the boat with Dodi Al-Fayed were not Princess Diana.
And you can tell, not only because of the differences, the little small differences, if you look really, really close, you could see, but also the passion between the two. Like the way that Dodi and this replicator were sitting there and communicating with each other and talking and communicating was not the passionate relationship that they actually had.
No, absolutely. And I mean, they're all using body doubles. Lincoln had a body double. Lincoln had food testers. All of this is swirling around, and these people use the same tactics. I mean, it's really amazing when you stop and put all of the pieces of the puzzle together. Hitler was using body double. Saddam Hussein was using a body double. Howard Hughes used a body double. These people, when you're the ultra elite and the ultra famous, you need to be very careful where you are, and you need to throw people off the track, especially if you're getting death threats. Definitely. I do not know if FDR had a body double. That one I looked for, and I couldn't. I actually looked for the evidence in the National Archives. But again, we have to talk about the National Archives. That is not the keeper of all knowledge, great and small.
No, there's another place where they really, really, really keep all the secret stuff.
The National Archives is just the governmental library that's what they want you to see.
Yeah, you can partake in this.
There's a man out there who, well, he's gone now, as most of the JFK researchers who are really good have gone. His name was Don Adams, and he was an FBI agent, and he retired, and he was special agent in Dallas at the time of the Kennedy assassination, and he was tasked with finding the bullets and where they went and everything. And I think he found, I'm not sure, I think he found 11 where the bullets landed either in the car or, like one hit a curb. I think he found 11 shots, and he snapped pictures of them, and he turned them turned them into his superiors, and that was it. They didn't know that he had copies for himself. So he retires and he goes to the National Archives to try and find the information that he gave the government. And you know what? It's not in the National Archives. It's nowhere to be found. So be very careful with the National Archives. FDR may very well have had a body double, but they just weren't letting anybody know it. I know.
Yeah, and that to me would be very intriguing. I know it's been going on for a very long time, but for FDR to do it, for me, would kind of be mind-blowing.
I know that, yeah, for sure. There's so much of this history that replicates, and the FDR thing is really taking people by storm. Your brother, like you said, he didn't know that. He thought you were crazy when you were talking about FDR being murdered.
Yeah, he's like, man, that guy was such a scumbag, total enemy of the USA, and I was like, yeah, he was murdered, and I'm going to do a show on this. That was when we did the Diana show. That's why I sent you a link this evening, that one as well as the Elvis one, but I named it Who Murdered Diana, FDR, and Elvis, because I thought we were going to talk about all of it. But like you said, you cannot cover all of this information in a 3-hour show, so let's do one. So we did Diana in the first place, but yeah, he's like, talking about what a D-bag that he was and everything, which I don't agree with, but a lot of people do. They're like, total enemy of the United States. How many presidents do you know that have set up a war? I know George W., George Jr., he totally set up a war. He was even reading a storybook to make himself look even more innocent than he really was. There's so many different setups, so many different things happening to send us to war. Even Vietnam was set up. This was just to go in and get things that we needed for our technologies and such, like total effing BS.
There's a lot of money in war.
Yeah, there is.
There's no money in peace. That's what got Diana killed.
Well, we are at the last 3 minutes and 25 seconds of the show. Would you like to let our listeners know again how to find your books, whether it's physically or verbally, like listening to it?
Sure. If you want, like I said, these books are an ebook and audio book all the way around the world. They're in Kindle. The books are Who Murdered Elvis? Who Murdered Elvis, the 5th Anniversary Edition, which is the backstory behind the first one. Who Murdered FDR, which is the one we discussed today. Who Murdered Diana, which I published this year. And the one that's coming up, Who Murdered Tesla, you'll have to wait for. It'll might be a year, maybe a year and a half, but you can get them. If you're around the world, you can get them on Amazon or ebook and audiobook. If you're in the U.S. and you want to get them, you want to have them autographed for a friend or for a gift or something for a loved one, go to my website, whomurderedbooks.com, whomurderedbooks.com. And in each one of my books, I gather the suspects, run them through motive, means, and opportunity, and I let the evidence run the show. And you will come up with information that decades and decades after these people died, you would not possibly believe. And FDR was murdered, folks, and the evidence is in the book, and you're going to have to get the book to get it and figure out who did it, because I'm not going to tell you.
I'm not going to tell you either.
I want you to know the history.
And there's so much history in there. And one of the things that I wanted to cover tonight was, man, that fucking file cabinet on Eleanor. Can you believe it? As far as communism and how they totally investigated her. Look at this file cabinet full of files that they did on Eleanor and being a communist. Like, pretty freaking epic. But thank you so much once again, Stephen, for being my guest this evening and joining us on Late Night in the Rockies. It was a total pleasure, and I really want to have you back soon, so you better hurry up and write that book.
Well, I'll see you in 2 years.
Oh my goodness, I don't know if I can wait that long. Hopefully you come on vacation or whatnot, and I can show you this community that Tesla has powered. It's pretty freaking amazing. Your mind is going to be blown. My mind was. I was just like, how is this happening?
I'll have to check it out. And I just want to tell everybody that I'm on Facebook, I'm on Twitter, Steve Ubaney, Ubaney. Connect with me, like me, follow me, whatever. Every now and then I'll put up something that will rock your world. I also have 2 Facebook groups that I have out there that I've started. One is on Elvis Presley, Elvis Who Murdered Him. People and a lot of researchers sharing information there that will blow your mind. Join the group. The other one is on Princess Diana, and it's entitled Princess Diana, Who Murdered Her. That's another one that I started. And I'm looking for another admin there. So if you feel like you want to contribute, be an admin to that, get a hold of me. My website, whomurderedbooks.com. You can get a hold of me there if you want me on your show. Fill out the form. I get back to everybody as quickly as I can. And I just wanted to say thanks for having me back on your show. It's been a great time.
Thanks for being here. I really enjoyed my time with you. And thank you to everyone for tuning in. Nighty night, love and light, and take care, my